What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot to get into the volleyball world, or at least quite a bit of it, as the ACC volleyball preseason polls have been released. Who is slated to first in the preseason polls, and who is slated to finish right behind that first place team. Also, the AVP had quite an eventful Atlanta Open tournament, as this was the first Gold Series tournament that was being played this season. Who came out on top on the men's and women's side, and who basically fell short, and was Mother Nature involved? Also, the Big Ten has been making moves as two more teams have been added to the fray. Also, speaking of the ACC, two more teams might be added to the ACC, which means what's going to happen with the Pac-12, and will we be seeing some teams migrate from other conferences to the Pac-12. Also, there's a special surprise that I have for you all sometime down the road in this show. You won't want to miss it, so hand me a volleyball, set the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday evening, Monday afternoon, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 206 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's do this. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on what is formerly known as Twitter, X, Instagram, and on TikTok. Also, for those that use Facebook still, follow them on Facebook. All you just have to do is type in the word IE, then sports, then radio in the search bar, see the icon, like us, and boom, that's how you're able to follow IE Sports Radio on Facebook. We also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and once you go there, you will see all the latest sports news, the IE Sports Radio blog, the Hall of Fame, the Fans of the Month, the pages dedicated to each of our podcasts, such as this one, our IE Sports Radio Community Forum, and our merchandise shop, which hopefully will be back in stock sooner rather than later. Because for the past 9 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. And thanks to you, we're starting to get bigger and bigger by the day. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. And thank you to everyone for all of your support, not only for this show, but for all of our shows. I want to say we're at like 34 shows, as we also have a new show airing later on today. I'll be getting into the details of that momentarily. No, that is not the special surprise. But in addition to that, IE Sports Radio has a sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, and is low in sugar and high in protein. This is some of the best beef jerky you will get your hands on, and it'll basically blow your mind and give your taste buds something to scream about in a good way. Basically, all you just gotta do is visit www.planetjerky.net and then place your order, and then boom. You don't have to basically go to Lake Elsinore or San Diego to basically get this jerky. You could basically order this off the internet. That's how easy it is to get jerky from Planet Jerky. Once again, huge shout out to Planet Jerky, Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that is on a whole other planet. And with all that said and done, let us get into that volleyball goodness that you all have been waiting for. So, the AVP had a tournament this past weekend, and it was a big-time tournament. It was the first Gold Series tournament as the AVP headed down to the ATL Atlanta, the land of Lil Jon, Ludacris, and all those rappers from the ATL. So, for the Gold Series, this was the first Gold Series tournament, and this is pretty much where everyone's going to have to bring their A game if they want to make the AVP Championships, which is still slated to announce its location. But regardless, I'm going to basically fast forward through most of the tournament because none of you really wanted me to go through all of the matchups of what happened. Also, I'm going to try to keep this show pretty short just because I don't want to go over 90 minutes just because, like I said, we have a new show that's airing at 10 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, 11 p.m. Eastern, so I don't want to step on anyone's toes. So, long story short, for the women's side, in terms of the Atlanta Open, every top 4 seed advanced. Now, it wasn't easy, though, as, believe it or not, there was actually a 13 seed that actually was pulling off upsets from left to right, and this 13 seed came from Florida State. Brooke Bauer and Katie Horton. I've seen them back. I saw them back in the Huntington Beach Open last year, and they're pretty darn good. They both, like I said, they're both from Florida State, and honestly, they both are formidable. And they upset Corinne Quiggle and Sarah Schermerhorn in the second round after upsetting Sarah Sponsel and Therese Kinnan in the first round, which is downright impressive. They did get toppled by Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang in the quarterfinals of the winner's bracket, which allowed Hughes and Chang to advance to the semifinals. And then in the contenders bracket, and then after that upset, or after Bauer and Horton pretty much went down, everything pretty much was basically, I wouldn't say back to normal, but everything was basically reverted back to the way it was. No one really got upset in terms of the top 4 seeds. It's just that all the seedings were just shuffled around, as instead of 1 facing 4, it was basically 1 facing 3 and then 2 facing 4, as Therese Kinnan and Sarah Sponsel made their way through the contenders bracket into the semifinals, and then Melissa Humana Paredes, which actually wound up losing to Teran Rodriguez and Kristen Nuss in the semifinals or the quarterfinals of the winner's bracket. They actually wound up making their way through the contenders bracket, which, like Melissa Humana Paredes said in the Huntington Beach Open this year, if you lose once in the winner's bracket, it just means that you have a much tougher path in the contenders bracket. And it's a longer path the earlier you lose in. And it gets really tough the earlier you lose in terms of the first rounds. But the semifinals consisted of Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang taking on Melissa Humana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. And then the other semifinal was Therese Kinnan and Sarah Sponsel taking on Kristen Nuss and Teran Rodriguez. So the first semifinal, well, they both were simultaneous. But long story short, the first one, which was on court, was the stadium court. It was actually an upset. So I was very surprised that this actually was considered, there was an upset pulled, because Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang, they actually did not drop a set before losing to Melissa Humana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. They swept Jelani Hodel and her partner, I forget the first name of her, Kaylee York. And then after that, they swept Teran Rodriguez and Savvy Simo. Then, like I said, they swept Katie Horton and Brooke Bauer. But then they lost to Melissa Humana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. So it was kind of interesting to see that happen, but I do got to give credit to Melissa Humana Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson for pulling that upset against the top seed Hughes and Chang. The other semifinal, it was Kristen Nuss and Teran Rodriguez sweeping Therese Kinnan and Sarah Sponsel. Kind of surprising, considering Therese Kinnan is just so tall. Like, if you've seen Therese Kinnan play, she's like 6'3", 6'4", and she's just ridiculous. So honestly, I really thought Teran Rodriguez Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss had an outstanding performance this tournament and in this whole thing as well. As just like Hughes and Cheng, Kloth and Nuss did not drop a set, pretty much on their way through the semifinals, and they didn't even drop a set into the semifinals. And then came the final between Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss, taking on Melissa Humana-Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. It was actually a rematch between the two pairs, as the two actually faced one another in in the quarterfinals of the winners bracket, where Kloth and Nuss took the win. But just like the quarterfinals, Kloth and Nuss picked up the victory, as, believe it or not, it was in set 2 where it was actually starting to rain, and it wasn't just because Kristen Nuss and Teran Kloth were scoring at will. It was because that it was actually raining because of the Atlanta weather. Like, it just went from really hot, it went from hot Atlanta to stormy, rainy Atlanta. Stormy, rainy Atlanta. So, Mother Nature did have a hand in the AVP tournament in Atlanta. So, I guess I should really go over the set scores of the semifinals and the final. So, the semifinal stadium matchup between Hughes and Cheng and Humana-Paredes and Wilkerson, that was won 21-18, 22-20 in favor of Melissa Humana-Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson. And Kloth and Nuss beat Sponsel and Cannon 21-17, 21-18. So close semifinals, if you ask me, which I think that's pretty entertaining. It just would have been great if we saw one go 3, but you can't complain. And then the final, Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss defeated Melissa Humana-Paredes and Brandy Wilkerson 21-16 and 21-12. And basically, Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss said they got to go fast because the rain was coming, and fortunately, they ended their match quickly before the rain stopped, or the rain came and basically put a damper on things and basically caused a weather delay. So it was good for Kristen Nuss and Teran Kloth to win, because that was actually their first tournament win. And they did so in dominant fashion. They didn't even drop a set in that entire tournament. So good for Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss. I want to say that did they even allow a pair to even surpass 20 points? I'd have to go back and look, but honestly, that's just rather impressive if you ask me. I might just go back and look at all of the pairs. So, really good job to Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss, aka Team Tiger, as one of our former hosts used to call them. So, yeah, their first match they didn't allow. Okay, so Teran Kloth and Kristen Nuss did allow a pair to surpass 20 points. I mean, it is kind of possible, but Deanna Kraft and Zana Muno did surpass 20, as Kloth and Nuss won that first set 24-22, whereas the second set it was a little bit more easier, winning it 21-16. But Kraft and Muno are very scrappy and resilient. Like, you just can't underestimate them. But I guess having the familiarity of facing Humana-Paredes and Wilkerson in the quarterfinals of the winners bracket just was a better benefit. And Nuss and Kloth, I think, to me, just had the formula to take down those two. And it's nothing bad or negative to say about Wilkerson or Humana-Paredes. I think they still are a great AVP pair, but unfortunately, they just did not have the it factor. And I think this was a little bit of revenge for when Nuss and Kloth lost to Humana-Paredes and Wilkerson in the Miami Open tournament way back when the AVP season first started. So, all in all, for Nuss and for Kloth, it's good to see them getting their first AVP tournament win, especially on the Gold Series. And again, they did so in dominant fashion, not even dropping a set. So, great job to Kloth and Nuss. They made LSU really proud, so I really think that's a big deal for Kloth and Nuss, as they're going to get a lot of points, because Gold Series tournaments are a huge amount of points, if I'm not mistaken. They're way more than the Tour Series and the Pro Series, if I'm not mistaken. So, after the women's semifinal, semifinals and final, we had the men's, as that was basically the ordering of the pairs. So on the men's side, it was a little bit different. Wasn't as the same as the women's side, but it was a little bit more entertaining. Well, okay, entertaining isn't the correct word, but it was a lot more eventful, if you ask me. As the semifinals consisted of Andy Benesch and Miles Partain taking on Theo Brunner and Trevor Crabb. And then the other semifinal was Chase Budinger, yes, the Chase Budinger, the former NBA player, and Miles Evans taking on Tri Bourne and Kame Schulk. So in the first semifinal, there was nothing to really see in the first semifinal, as the top seed Andy Benesch and Miles Partain took down Theo Brunner and Trevor Crabb 21-14 and 22-20. The second set was close, but Benesch and Partain basically did their thing. I won't say that Brunner and Crabb did not play well, but you're facing the number one seed. But I will say this, it was still a fight to the finish, and considering that Brunner and Crabb actually got upset in the quarterfinals against Bourne and Schulk, it's still rather impressive that they were able to make their way back to the semifinals. So that's still pretty good. Now the other semifinal, oh boy, this semifinal was really good. So Budinger and Evans took a very eventful first set, 22-20. And then the second set, it wasn't as eventful, as Tri Bourne and Kame Schulk won at 21-13. And then set 3, oh man. Lots of drama and chaos, as I even live tweeted this. I basically said Budinger and Evans and Bourne and Schulk are basically giving it their all, literally. And heck, it was basically Budinger and Evans having multiple match points, but Bourne and Schulk basically doing everything they can to just stay alive. And then when Bourne and Schulk had their first match point, they actually took time out. And they actually did not take time out in the first two sets. So I basically was thinking, okay, well, you might as well just call your time out to just give yourself a breather and to basically draw something up to try to slow down Chase Budinger and Miles Evans. But I even was tweeting out how long the sets were going, and basically how the third set lasted longer than the first two sets. And believe it or not, the third set lasted longer than the first set and the second set. Not combined, but in terms of point length, the third set actually surpassed the first set. I'm not sure about time, but I will say that the third set was a thriller, as Chase Budinger and Miles Evans wound up beating Kame Schulk and Tri Bourne 23-21 as they advanced to the final. They actually are the only non-top 5 seed to advance to the semifinals, and they were the only non-top 5 seed to advance to the final. So good job to Chase Budinger and Miles Evans, as I was very impressed by them. The fact that they were able to dodge a couple match points, and the fact that they were able to upset the 3 seed, it's really good. They also upset Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander in the second round of the winners bracket, which is good. They almost upset Andy Benesch and Miles Partain in the winners bracket quarterfinals, but they fell just a little short, as, again, Benesch and Partain are just two men on a mission, as they're just on a whole other level. But something else to note is that in the contenders bracket, funny thing is that I mentioned Chase Budinger and Miles Evans. They actually almost lost to friend of the show, Avery Drost, and his partner, Phil Dalhauser, in the contenders bracket final, aka the golden ticket to advance to Championship Sunday or the semifinals. But Budinger and Evans dropped the first set, but then wound up winning the next two sets as Budinger and Evans advanced to the semifinals. And then, like I said, they advanced to the final, where they take on the top seed of Andy Benesch and Miles Partain. So a lot of rematches that have been happening, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's cool to see rematches of certain pairs taking on other pairs. So the first set, I hate to say this, but Benesch and Partain really jumped out to an early lead. And then the rain came and decided to rain on their parade. And there was, I think it was like an hour or so of a rain delay, which really sucked. And I kind of feel that the rain delay was kind of something good for Budinger and Evans. But in the end, it didn't really help them all that much, as Benish and Partain took that first set 21-13. Then it was early in set 2 where Budinger and Evans led 3-1, and then they got another rain delay, or another weather delay, as the proper term is what it's called. As basically, we got to see another weather delay, and I even tweeted this out. I basically tweeted out a picture of Eric Beattie of the Las Vegas Ramblers. This was something I actually had in my outtakes with Nick England when we were doing the post-game press conferences. And Eric Beattie was having fun and just putting on a shocked face or like a surprised face and whatnot. And I basically put volleyball fans' reaction or volleyball fans' face knowing that they're in another weather delay. And then the AVP actually replied to me and said, "We feel that." So I thought, yeah, I think we're all Eric Beattie at this point. It's probably the best meme photo I could probably come up with in terms of that. But unfortunately, after the weather delay, it just could not slow down Andy Benish and Miles Partain as they wound up winning set 2 21-13 and the match, as Benish and Partain were just straight up dominant. They weren't as dominant as Nuss and Kloth were in terms of the women's AVP Atlanta Open, but honestly, I really thought they were rolling for the most part. And they only lost one set, which was, ironically enough, to Budinger and Evans in the quarterfinals of the winners bracket. So, all in all, for Benish and Partain, it's their second AVP tournament win, which is huge because I really think that these two are going to continue to do great things. And I really am stoked to see what the former USC pair, or the former USC player and the former UCLA Bruin can do in terms of their talent and what they can do in terms of getting better. And honestly, I think this is going to be something special between Andy Benish and Miles Partain. So I'm excited to see what can happen with Benish and Partain. So I think it was a great tournament, all in all things considered, even though there were weather delays in the men's final. I really wish there were weather delays, but I guess it beats moving the tournament final to today. That would have really thrown a monkey wrench into everything. That would have just straight up sucked, and especially on East Coast time. And unfortunately, I think the finals were supposed to originally be slated on ESPN2, and then it got moved to ESPN Plus, and then it also got streamed to Bally Sports, which people were complaining about the live stream from Bally Sports, which is understandable. I understand that the live stream isn't all that great, and it's not as clear as ESPN and whatnot, but it is what it is sometimes, and this is why I like going to live events. This is why I like seeing things live and in person instead of just watching on a live stream. So, honestly, I can't really say I'm ultimately surprised. You also have to remember that the weather delay was making everything go haywire and wonky. And heck, I wouldn't be surprised if the water was basically causing some of the distortion and whatnot, or the wind or anything of that sort. So I understand volleyball fans were basically getting slapped in the face by Bally Sports and the AVP, but it's not all the AVP's fault. You gotta understand that things happen, and Mother Nature is beyond the control of the AVP. So let's all just take a deep breath and not get angry. So anyway, so that is basically that for the Atlanta Open. And next up, in terms of the AVP tournaments, we have ourselves the granddaddy of them all. Yes, another Gold Series tournament. We have the Manhattan Beach Open on August 18th through the 20th. And believe it or not, I actually have that day off. Maybe I can actually attend. I could. I mean, I obviously can't on a Saturday just because I have the Pepperdine Long Beach State women's volleyball scrimmage, which, I mean, I obviously can't. I can't be at two places at once, which it would be cool if I could attend both if I could attend both. But that's just too much to basically go to, and that's just a lot of hustle and bustle and driving and whatnot. So, by the way, for those that are wondering what time the Long Beach State and Pepperdine women's volleyball scrimmage is going to be at, it's going to be at 3 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to be at the Walter Pyramid in Long Beach, California. And I highly doubt there's going to be a live stream. But I'll be there. So that's pretty much that. That was a shameless plug, by the way. But anyway, back to the AVP. The Manhattan Beach Open is a huge deal because if you win, you basically get your name put on the Manhattan Beach Pier. That is a huge, huge, huge deal. And my good golly gracious, this is basically going to draw a crowd. It's basically going to be like the Huntington Beach Open, except better. Like, it's going to be so big time. And here's the event details. Established in 1960, there is one AVP synonymous with the word iconic. The Manhattan Beach Open, the reigning epicenter of professional beach volleyball, the granddaddy of them all, like I said, returns to its spot on the throne with the biggest draw of the season. With last year's reigning champions now on separate teams, we're guaranteed to crown two new duos in 2023, who will cement their place in history on the fabled Manhattan Beach Pier this year. Location is the Manhattan Beach Pier. And the entry list has been released, and it's August 18th through the 20th, as that's actually next week. So, do I want to preview this right now? You know what? We'll preview this right now. We might as well preview this right now, and then we'll head to a commercial break, and then we'll go to our ACC, and then we'll go to our little other things following the commercial break. So, on the women's side, the top four seeds are as follows. Julia Scholes and Betsy Flint. Interesting, because Julia Scholes... Before I continue, Julia Scholes actually did not play this tournament, as she actually had a knee injury from the previous tournament that she and Betsy Flint played in. So, Betsy Flint's partner was actually Megan Rice. Yes, the Megan Rice, the former LMU beach volleyball and indoor volleyball player who played at Redondo Union High School, who was just straight up phenomenal with Savvy Simo. She was just outstanding, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, that Megan Rice, or as many call her, Megan Jane Rice, or Megan J. Rice. So, there's that right there. So, where was I? Oh, yes. Back to the Manhattan Beach Open in terms of the top four seeds. Julia and Betsy Flint are the top seed, which is quite fascinating. Then Sarah Schermerhorn and Corinne Quiggle are the 2 seed. Megan Kraft and Emily Stockman are the 3 seed. And then Molly Turner and Maddie Anderson are the 4 seed. This is quite interesting. No Sarah Hughes and Kelly Chang? Well then. Can't say I'm ultimately shocked, but yeah. Those are your top 4 seeds. And then the following are as follows that have made the main draw. Haley Harward and Kelly Kalinsky, Tony Rodriguez and Savvy Simo, Zana Muno and Deanna Kraft, Jeannie Urango and Sarah Pavin, Lily Maestrini and Larissa Maestrini, Jen Ketty and Katie Dickens, Katie Horton and Jessica Gaffney, Tegan Van Gunst and Kim Hildreth, Caitlin Mullaney and Carly Skogit, Lexi Denneberg and Carly Can, Megan Rice, not Megan J. Rice, Megan Rice and Macy Jerger, Katie Lindstrom and Carly Wopat, and rounding off the main draw participants is Megan J. Rice from Hermosa Beach, and Brooke Bauer. So that's basically all your main draw participants, as there's actually going to be a wild card from the CBVA Wild Card Series. Interesting. And then there's also a wild card from the Wapaka tournament, as that'll be Aurora Davis and Abby Van Winkle. Then another one of those will be Amy Ozzie and Mariah Whalen. Then Kylie DeBerg and Elena Chacon. Nice. Nice little duo right there. Former LSU and Florida State players, beach volleyball players. Then Chloe Loreen and Natalie Robinson are the other wild card from Waupaca. And then there's also 2 more main draw participants, Devin Newberry and Jaden Whitmarsh, and then Kaylee York and Megan Gebhard. So those are all your main draw participants right there with the 4 wild cards from Waupaca. And then we also have the CBVA wild card series, which is to be announced. So everyone else is basically in the qualifier, which I'm not going to read off the list, but there are some notable names, such as Maddie Shields, the former Pepperdine indoor player and the USC beach volleyball champion. There's Jolani Hodel, who surprisingly is not partnering up with Kaylee York. Charlie Ekstrom, the former Stanford standout. Kate Riley is another former Stanford standout. Tessa Van Winkle, I want to say she also played at UCLA. If not, I'm thinking of the other Van Winkle. Tori Van Winden, she played at Cal Poly. Avery Popinga, I want to say she was Pepperdine, if I'm not mistaken. If not, feel free to correct me. Delaney Maple, I'm very surprised Delaney Maple is in the qualifier. I'm just going to say this, if Delaney Maple and Megan Kraft were partners, and this is no knock on Megan Kraft's current partner, Emily Stockman, I would basically see Delaney Maple and Megan Kraft in going deep in this tournament. But I could see Delaney Maple getting into the main draw out of the qualifying round, but time will tell. Who knows? Delaney Maple is a former USC star, and she was Megan Kraft's former partner at USC. Then there's Perry Brennan, who was also on UCLA, or was on UCLA. And that's pretty much going to cover it. I'm not going to basically read off every name. There's the Norse twins, Nicole Norse and Audrey Norse, who are basically in the qualifiers. And then there's Carly Lloyd, not the soccer player. Want to say she's no way is she the former USA indoor player that's playing on the beach. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking too much into it. But anyway, on the men's side, the top 4 seeds are Trevor Crabb and Theo Brunner, Kame Schulk and Tri Bourne, Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander, and Miles Evans and Chase Budinger. So that's your top 4 seeds. The rest of the pairs are basically main draw participants, as I'll go over the main draw participants, then go over the wild cards, and then that'll pretty much do it. So the rest of the pairs are basically following the 4 seed. Tim Brewster and Kyle Friend, Avery Drost, friend of the show, and Phil Dalhauser, Evan Corey and Troy Field, Tim Baumgren and Paul Lotman, Billy Allen and Allison Cerruti, Logan Weber and Hagen Smith, Dave Palm and Chase Frischman, Sean Cook and Cody Caldwell, Jake Diedrich and Travis Meewerder, Bill Kolinsky and John Hayden, Celia Tucker and, oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher this one, George, I really don't want to butcher this one, George Klasnick. I can't pronounce. George Klasnick. Celia Tucker's partner. Andrew Dentler. Jacob Landell. Ian Satterfield. John Michael Plummer. Jake Uriuda. And Caleb Queckel. And Andrew Holman and Diane Zaka. So that's all your main draw participants. For the CBA or CBVA wildcard series, the pair has yet to be announced. Now for the wildcards from Waupaca, that consists of Adam Roberts and Jeffrey Samuels, Gage Basie and Diego Perez, Christopher Vaughn and John Ferrari, and Ralph Paulus and Marty Lorenz. those are pretty much your wild cards from Walpaca, who are also in the main draw. And that's pretty much all your main draw participants. Everyone else is basically a qualifier, as Nathan Yang and Michael Grossell are a pair to watch for. Trying to think of some notable names in this. There's got to be at least one notable name in that I can pretty much see here. I want to give some love to the guys. There's Alec Podrasky, who I got to see at Orange Coast College. Cole Pender, former UCLA star, who played libero, who kind of got to play a little bit of outside. Will Rotman, why does that last name sound so familiar? Rotman. Oh, Will Rotman. That's that guy who played at Santa Barbara. And isn't that that's the Stanford guy. How could I forget about him? So, yeah, Will Rotman, Calvin Sanborn, the Long Beach State, and now NVA champion from the Orange County Stunner, and his partner Trent Lindgren. Again, I want to give some of these guys some love here. Jordan Hoppy, the former Las Vegas Rambler, and he got to see some AVP time, so he's also in the AVP qualifier of this Manhattan Beach. Luke Turner, the former Stanford guy, he's also in this thing, along with Jack Walmer, who is currently playing at Santa Barbara. So there's some guys here. And that's pretty much going to do it. I don't want to read off the entire list, otherwise I'm going to sound like Mother Goose. And that's pretty much all of the entry list in terms of the Manhattan Beach Gold Series tournament. And like I said, this is the granddaddy of them all. This is basically going to be for a good portion of the marbles. This is going to be for a lot of points and for a spot on the Manhattan Beach Pier. And it's a huge deal. And I wish I could maybe go to this. I'll try to go to the Sunday one. I might be busy on that Sunday. I do have that day off, though. So time will tell. Maybe I could possibly, hence the word possibly, go to that event. We'll see, though. We'll see. But keep your eyes peeled on that. That is going to do it for the AVP portion of the show. We are nearly 38 minutes into the show, as we're going to take ourselves a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to discuss some ACC volleyball, and we'll talk a little bit of Big Ten, and we can't forget about that special surprise. Keep it locked here. You were listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide for your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always willing to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, such as The Defining Moment with Larry B, Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson, and Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karn, which goes on primarily an hour before this show. Also, we have ourselves a new show that is going to be going live at 8 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Central, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's a New Orleans show called Where You At Sports Chat with Joey Pegard. And it's going to be on and popping, and I'm going to be sure to tune in. So we only have about 45 minutes left, so we're going to try to make way and get everything done before Joey goes live. On the note of shows, next week's show is actually going to be moved to 3 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Eastern. And you're probably wondering, oh God, not another show moved in terms of its time. Come on, Teran, be consistent with your time. Well, for starters, next week is actually going to be the season finale of Set Point. I actually want to say this is season 4 of Set Point. I actually have lost track. I've actually honestly lost track of how many seasons Set Point has been on, as, golly, I've been on the air for 200 episodes. I still can't believe I'm at 200. Like, how did I get to 200? Anyway, yeah, next week is the season opener, or season finale of Set Point, and I actually want to get this right. I want to see if the season 4 finale. Yeah, this isn't the season 4 finale of Set Point. And next week we're going to end the season 4 with a bang, as next week's season 4 finale is going to have none other than the U.S. men's national head coach John Speraw as a guest. You heard it right, everybody. The U.S. men's national volleyball coach and UCLA men's head volleyball coach John Speraw is going to be a guest on Set Point at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern. You're not going to want to miss it, as it's going to be a big show. I'm really excited to have John Speraw on as a guest. We have been talking about when we're going to have a show and when we're going to possibly have him on the show. We try to have like different time zones and when basically a time will work with John's schedule and my schedule. And I said, let's shoot for a little earlier. And I basically can shuffle my schedule around. And honestly, anything for John Speraw. Like, if he's basically interested in my podcast, and he even asked me, how is my volleyball podcast going? And the fact that he even cared really just made me say to myself, if he wants to be a guest, I'm going to cater to this man no matter what. And I really want to have him on as a guest for the 200th episode, but I will just say this. Beggars can't be choosers. So we're going to be 7 episodes late for having him on as a guest. But honestly, having him on as a guest to close out Season 4 of Set Point is going to be super epic. And heaven knows, if anyone has any suggestions on possible guests for the Season 5 opener, I'd like to basically hear them. And if you're following me, you might want to reach out to me and tell me if you want to be on as a guest. Shameless plug for the Season 5 premiere in a couple more weeks, but I digress. Anyway, so that is that. That's the big news right there. John Speraw is going to be on the show next week, and it's going to be big. It's going to be popping, but it'll be at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun, and I'm really going to be excited for it. All right. But now for segment number 2 of Set Point. So the ACC volleyball polls were released last week, and by golly, it was something quite special. It was released, I want to say it was released sometime last Thursday, as the preseason poll. It was kind of interesting, as the top 2 was no surprise. Everyone else is basically battling for third all the way down. So going from 15 through 11, that consists of Virginia Tech at 15, Syracuse at 14, Virginia at 13, Boston College at 12, and Clemson at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Notre Dame at 10, Wake Forest at 9, North Carolina State or NC State at 8, Duke at 7, and North Carolina at 6. 5 through 1 consists of a tie for 4th, as Georgia Tech and Florida State tied for 4th, as they both have 153 points. 3rd is Miami, and 2 and 1 are so close, it's separated by 1 point. Pitt finished with 189 points, and they had 7 first-place votes, but they are slated to finish 2nd in the ACC volleyball preseason polls, as the number 1 team that is slated to finish first in the ACC volleyball conference, the ACC in terms of women's volleyball, and who is slated to finish first in the preseason poll is... you already know who it is. Louisville. So, yeah, it could have gone either way with Louisville and Pitt. That's basically the two-headed monster. I wouldn't have been surprised if they both were slated to finish tied atop like they were last year. But Pitt and Louisville, yeah, it's that close. That 1 point separated the two. And Louisville had 8 first-place votes, while Pitt had 7. No other team garnered any first-place votes. Yeah. It's basically their conference to lose. And this is no offense to the other teams. I really think that the other teams can basically get the job done. But honestly, it's basically going to be Louisville and Pitt battling it out for first place. Everyone else is basically battling for third and possibly a at-large in terms of the NCAA tournament. But we'll see what happens. So there are some storylines I actually want to go over in terms of the ACC in terms of women's volleyball. So one of them happens to be this. Can Florida State actually, live up to this expectation of finishing in the top 5? So if you all remember last year, Florida State had this really good team that I was so on the hype train for. I was really hyped for that Florida State team from last year. And even their head coach, I think his name is Chris Poole, I want to say. He was basically going on and saying that this was their best team in quite a while in terms of talent. And honestly, I was on the hype train. I was so hyped, and I really wanted to believe it. And yes, Chris Poole, their head coach, he basically got me hooked. But Florida State didn't really have a true marquee win, and they wound up getting bounced by UNI, Northern Iowa, which, yeah. And I actually picked Florida State to go to the round of 32. I didn't have them getting past Minnesota, that's for sure. But I at least have them winning in round 1. My golly, dude. So, my storyline question for Florida State is, can Florida State win without a stacked roster? That's my question. I hope so, considering everyone else is kind of an anomaly outside of Pitt and Louisville. I think they can, but Miami returns a good amount of their team. Georgia Tech is also a big question mark. I'll get into that a little bit later. Florida State, to me, that's my biggest concern. Can they win when the lights shine bright in ACC play? It's all going to depend on who really comes to play in terms of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing in terms of the Florida State in terms of the ACC. But all in all, for Florida State, I think they can, but I feel Florida State being at 5 is a little bit high in my opinion. But who's to say? And then another storyline question for me is, can Georgia Tech thrive in the post-Julia Bergman era? Okay, now I actually had a list comprised of some of the top players, the top 6 players, in my opinion, from a majority of the ACC teams that you should keep an eye on. Unfortunately, I did not get to Virginia, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech, which were the bottom 3 teams. And sadly, I did not get to Georgia Tech because their stats are just so unprinter friendly. I'm sorry, but it's not. But I could tell that Georgia Tech is going to have a little bit of a tough time without Julia Bergman. And it's so tough to replace Julia Bergman because she was such a fantastic player. As she had 538 kills. 538. I'm pretty sure she's probably one of the all-time kill leaders at Georgia Tech. And for me, here's my thing for Georgia Tech. I think it's going to take Georgia Tech a long while for them to get used to not having Julia Bergman. Do I think that they can thrive without her? Of course. Will it take some time? Absolutely. It's going to take Bianca Bertolino to step up, as well as some of the other players to basically just step up to the plate and become that next big-time hitter. It basically was the case when Mariana Brambilla was there. It was the case when Julia Bergman was there. And now it's going to be the case for whoever is going to be the next Julia Bergman. So, for me, I will say this about Georgia Tech. 4th, I think, is realistic. And they do have a good head coach. I will say that. But I will also say this. Don't expect them to go deep into the NCAA tournament should they make it. I feel of the Power 5 conferences of this season, I think the ACC might be the odd one out. I'm not trying to say the ACC sucks, but outside of Pitt and Louisville and maybe Miami, I don't see any of those other teams going deep or even maybe making the NCAA tournament. I'm not trying to say any of these teams suck. I just think that these teams on paper don't look so appealing or appetizing to to put in the NCAA tournament. Now, a lot can happen, and maybe a team can pull off an upset against maybe Miami or Pitt on an off night from Pitt, or Louisville has an off night. But it's going to take so much for that to happen. And honestly, I just don't see Georgia Tech pulling off an upset, even if Georgia Tech is playing at home. Maybe Georgia Tech could beat Miami. Maybe Florida State can beat Miami because interstate rivalries and all. But I just don't see any one of the other teams taking down Pitt or Louisville. Like I said, it's Pitt and Louisville's conference to lose. So we'll see. Maybe I'm just saying, again, if Pitt and Louisville get caught on a bad night, they could fall, but I highly doubt that happens. With the talent they have, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And then another storyline question from the ACC in terms of women's volleyball happens to be, can Notre Dame actually rise to power? And again, these are my personal questions. This isn't the questions from all the ACC heads or from Volley Talk. But can Notre Dame actually rise back to power? So if you remember back in the old days from like a couple seasons ago, Notre Dame was actually pretty darn good. They actually almost won the ACC. They were only one match away and one rematch away from Louisville from possibly winning the conference. Unfortunately, that rematch against Louisville never happened, and they wound up being a half a game short because that game got canceled due to COVID-19 protocols. And sadly, basically, Notre Dame was on the outside looking in, and sadly, they just could not get that second matchup they had. So, for Notre Dame, last year was kind of a little bit of a rebuild year, but for them having a really good coach in Salima Rockwell, I'll say this, she's a fantastic coach, as she was a fantastic player. But for Notre Dame to have a fantastic coach as Salima Rockwell, you would think they would have a whole lot more respect than finishing 10th. I would think they'd be finishing at least in maybe the top 7. Now, Notre Dame obviously has had a lot of roster turnover and whatnot, but I want them to actually do better. One of my friends plays for Notre Dame. I really hope that Notre Dame can, hence the word can, and hope they can possibly turn the table this year. They did have a few injuries here and there, but honestly, that's not really the ultimate excuse. And I know they play in a stacked conference with the likes of Miami, Pitt, and Louisville, but I think this conference is kind of up for grabs outside of Louisville, Pitt, and Miami. I feel there are some teams that still have questions to answer, and I feel not everything's set in stone for some of these teams. So, in my opinion, can Notre Dame get back to their former dominant self before the Salima Rockwell era? Yes. I really think Salima Rockwell can take this team back to the 2021-2019 days. Because I think Notre Dame is a promising program. They just need, and they have promising underclassmen and who are now basically grown up. So we'll see what happens come Notre Dame season. I honestly have a soft spot for Notre Dame just because, again, not just because I have a friend that plays on that team, but because I feel this program, I want to say this team once played in the Big Ten, and then it got shuffled into the ACC. But honestly, for Notre Dame, I think this team does have a lot of bright spots, and they used to be a top 5 powerhouse in the ACC, and now they've kind of slipped all the way down to the bottom 10, or bottom 5. So Salima Rockwell has got to, I wouldn't say she's got to do something, but she's got to basically get this team back to its dominating ways before she came here. So we'll see. And then another question I have is, can North Carolina and or Duke make the NCAA tournament this year? That still remains to be seen. They do have some firepower returning. North Carolina being Mabry Schaffmaster, Duke being Gracie Johnson, and a few other players. Oh, Duke also got Jess Robinson, North Carolina got a transfer from Chapel Hill who had 500 plus kills, which I guess is good, but it was from Chapel Hill. But can they make the NCAA tournament? Well, maybe. Depends on if they play their cards right. I feel North Carolina can, and maybe Duke. I think Duke took a bigger step from the previous season. I feel Duke has a lot more potential from its previous years, and they did have a lot more promise from its few more years that it had. I mean, Duke has had its years where it's looked good, but now it needs to have now no longer needs to have its baby steps. It needs to have its big girl steps. Now obviously they're picked to finish 6th and 7th, which isn't bad. And like I said, Florida State and Georgia Tech, they still have answers that they need to or questions that they need to address. But for them, for Duke and North Carolina, I still think that they still have that potential in terms of possibly, hence the word possibly, make it to the NCAA tournament. But all in all, for Duke and North Carolina, I feel they have the potential. I feel they're right there. They both finished 500, which is good. Can they take the next step? It all depends. And they're not too far. Okay, well, they're kind of far off, especially Duke. Duke has got 109 points. Ooh. I think Duke is much better than 109 points. Like, they should not be that far off from North Carolina. I mean, 17 points isn't that far off, but man. So, I feel that the voters gave Georgia Tech and Florida State a little too many points, if you ask me. Especially since they lost a good portion of their team, especially Georgia Tech. Like, I understand maybe Georgia Tech should be 4, but I don't know about Florida State. But back to Duke and North Carolina. I think Duke and North Carolina is much more closer to actually clinching a at-large spot into the NCAA tournament than most people think they are. I'm not sure if they can, considering you have to remember that the ACC is pretty stacked, but it is possible with the amount of talent that they brought in, especially Duke. Duke also returns a really good chunk of their team. North Carolina, I don't know. I want to say Duke might be better than North Carolina, and that's not just me looking at the returning players. I think that's just me saying that looking at the amount of talent that they have, not just the returning talent that they have and the amount of players that they brought in, I think that Duke really just has that potential and it factor. And Jolie Nagel is a veteran in terms of being a head coach. Now, obviously, Coach Shaw, I think his first name Mike Shaw. Regardless, Coach Shaw is going to be in his first year as Mike Shaw, the head coach of UNC. He obviously has familiarity with the UNC or North Carolina women's volleyball team. However, he's taking over as head coach. Do I really think he can have success? Of course. He obviously learned from the best, as the previous head coach being Joe Segula. He was a pioneer. That guy you just cannot replace overnight. But Mike Shaw, I don't think he has to replace too much in terms of taking over as head coach. And he's an in-house hire. It's not like you have to go extremely far to basically bring in a new hire. So we'll see what Mike Shaw could bring. But if I had to basically choose, I would basically put Duke over North Carolina. And again, this is no knock on North Carolina, but I just think Duke, with the amount of talent that they return and the amount of talent that they have, I think Duke might actually pose more of a threat to the other teams out in the ACC, not named Louisville, Pitt, and Miami. So there's that right there. And then my last question is, why is Boston College ranked picked to finish 12th in the ACC. So I looked at all of the returning players from Boston College, and I'm thinking Boston College is way more talented than 12th. I was picking my players to watch for in terms of Clemson and Boston College. It was so tough to pick Clemson because Clemson had players that had either graduated or transferred. Meanwhile, for Boston College, yes, they lost players to graduation, but Boston College, which won the NIVC, which is basically the NCAA women's volleyball version of the NIT, they still had players from last year's NIVC championship team, which are on this year's team. I can't believe that these people are picking Boston College to finish 12th in the ACC. Am I missing something here? 12th? They had 54 points. Unless I'm really missing something, unless Boston College had other transfers that happened, or their coach got put on probation, or Boston College has to forfeit games and the season's not starting, I don't get it. Boston College is way too talented to be finishing 12th. I am predicting right now, Boston College finishes inside the top 10. Let's go safe and say inside the top 10. They are not finishing 12th. I will say that right there. I'm going to see Boston College when they play UC Irvine on September 2nd, I want to say. Is it 2nd or 3rd? 3rd. It's a Sunday, so I promise you I will be seeing them. So I really can't wait to see Boston College in action, and I hope I don't step on the coach's toes when I basically ask what he thinks about his Jason Kennedy's. I hope I don't step on Jason Kennedy's toes when I ask him what he thinks about being picked to finish 12th in the ACC coaches polls. But man, that's brutal right there. You can't just be picked to finish 12th after you won the WNIVC. I mean, I know it's the WNIVC, but golly, dude. Like, that's disrespectful right there. If I was that coach, I'd be saying, I'd be putting that on bulletin board material and then motivating my team to have them say, all right, y'all, this is what they think of us. I actually do want to look at Boston College's schedule. Oh, they're playing Michigan. They got Tennessee. They're at San Diego. Okay, well, they got San Diego and Tennessee at San Diego. Then they got UC Irvine, which... Why does it say it's at San Diego? Something I don't understand is that UC Irvine says it's at the Bren Event Center. I'm going to have to talk to, what's-her-face? Stacey King about that. But UC Irvine is actually playing prior to that in the Windy City Invitational. So Detective Teran is on the case. And yes, Davidson, it is a tournament. It's called the Windy City Invitational. It's not an actual tournament. It's just like a round robin thing where two teams face one another on one day, and then two teams face another on another day, and then two teams face another on another day. So take for instance the Windy City Invitational. UC Irvine will be playing Chicago State, and then Jacksonville State will be playing Southeast Missouri State later on in the day or earlier in the day, and then UC Irvine will be playing Southeast Missouri State on the next day, and then Chicago State and Jacksonville State will be playing each other earlier or later on in the day, and then Jacksonville State and UC Irvine will be playing each other on the last day of the Invitational, and then Chicago State and Southeast Missouri State will be facing each other later on in the day, just because I'm fairly certain Chicago State is the host team, and since Jacksonville State and UC Irvine are playing each other at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I'm fairly certain Chicago State and Southeast Missouri State are facing one another later on. So I did want to give a shout out to Larry B and Davidson Crooks in the chat room. Davidson was asking if it was a tournament. It's not really a tournament, but there is kind of like a little bit of a trophy or bragging rights. But for UC Irvine, yeah, I'm going to have to inquire about if Boston College and UC Irvine are playing in Irvine and not San Diego. I hope they are. I really want to see Boston College. If they are playing in San Diego, then, well, that sucks. So I am going to have to go straight to the horse, get it straight from the horse's mouth in regards to that. So we'll see what happens, and it'll be a time will tell process. But I imagine UC Irvine's going to be gassed when they get back from Chicago, Illinois. They'll have played 4 matches in 4 days. They got Chicago State, Southeast Missouri State, Jacksonville State, then Boston College. Man. And then they're going to be jet lagged, too. Are we sure this is a good idea, UC Irvine? And then they've got Washington State two days after. Who comprised UC Irvine's women's volleyball schedule again? Anyway, back to Boston College. Then they've got the Iona Classic, where they've got LIU Brooklyn, Iona, and Fordham. Then they played Rhode Island in a non-conference slate. Then they've got the Boston College Harvard co-host slate, that's what it's called, the BC Harvard co-host, which I guess it's kind of a double dip thing, as Boston College plays Providence, then Harvard, then Stonehill, then Merrimack. It's basically 2 double headers, so that's cool. And then Boston College plays ACC play, which I'm not going to jump all that much into, just because it's ACC play. But I think Boston College finishes higher than 12th place. I still think that's ridiculous that Boston College is slated to finish 12th place. That is so harsh for an NIVC champion. So, especially a team that actually returns a majority of its players from last year's said champion team. Man, that's brutal right there. And I actually do want to go over Boston College's notable players. Grace Penn and Sophia Lambros, their 6'2" offense, which is basically a double setter. Not like double quarterbacks, but 2 setters rotating in at once. Which, okay, it is kind of like 2 quarterbacks in the NFL. But I digress. They also have Anna Murphy, who led them in digs with 531. They have Jenna Pollock, who was 3rd in digs with 260. Katrina Jensen, who was 2nd in kills with 281. By the way, Pollock was actually 4th in kills with 260. And then Elena Crabtree, who was 3rd in kills with 280. And then Julia Haggerty was 5th in... Oh no, she had 146 kills, but she was well outside the top 5 in terms of kills. But she led the team in blocks with 155 blocks, which I think is good. So, all in all, Boston College did lose the likes of Izzy Clavena, as well as Sylvia Iaselli and Kate Brennan. But Boston College still has a good amount of their team from last year, with the exception of a few others. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of my ACC players to watch for, just because we are kind of running close on time. We have 15 minutes until the next show goes on in terms of IE Sports Radio. It was kind of a bit of a whirlwind day for me, as unfortunately I got slated to work until 6 p.m., but here I am. Anyway, so we'll save my ACC players to watch for next week's show in the Season 4 finale of Set Point. But before I go, I actually do want to give my little take on the Big Ten. And actually, before I move on from the Big Ten news, move on to the Big Ten and my thoughts on it, there was actually some Big Ten news regarding the NBA, as I, Teran Rodriguez, am your one-stop shop for all things NBA news. So, the NBA actually hired a new assistant coach, a Big Ten team actually hired a new assistant coach from one of the big... let's start this over again. A Big Ten volleyball team hired an assistant coach from the NBA. And that player just so happens to be, can we get a drum roll please? Ryan Mather. Yes, Ryan Mather of the Texas Tyrants is joining Rutgers' coaching staff. So I think that is big time right there, as Ryan Mather had himself a great first season with the Texas Tyrants, as he is a former Las Vegas Rambler who wound up winning the NBA championship with the Ramblers back in 2022. Here's his bio. Ryan Mather joined the Rutgers volleyball coaching staff in August of 2023. Mather arrived, quote unquote, on the banks after spending the 2022-2023 season as an assistant at Lafayette College and earning a bronze medal as a member of the Texas Tyrants with the NVA, or National Volleyball Association. I'm surprised they don't mention the fact that he also won gold with the Las Vegas Ramblers, which, okay, they do mention that he won gold with the Las Vegas Ramblers, and they won silver with the Ramblers in 2021, and then bronze with the Ramblers in 2020. So that's cool. And then it also mentions that Mather graduated from Grand Canyon in a degree in exercise science, and he's a 3-time All-Conference honoree and a 3-time All-Academic Team member with the Lopes, and also participating in the U.S. Junior National Training U21 team. So I'm just going to say this. Rutgers got a good one, and I am excited to basically see Rutgers basically get a good guy in Ryan Mather. And I hope he brings that championship experience that he had on the Las Vegas Ramblers that he has to Rutgers' team. I think it's definitely doable that he can. And certainly Rutgers, and this is no knock on Rutgers, they can't go any worse than they are now. And that's not trying to be mean or anything. I hope Ryan Mather could pump life into the Rutgers' volleyball program. I think it would be awesome to see them competitive and whatnot, but we'll see. All right, but that is that for that little bit of Big Ten volleyball news. Now we got to address the true elephant in the room, as we have about 10 minutes before our show, our new volleyball, or our new Louisiana show goes live. All right, so obviously Washington and Oregon joining the Big Ten is big, to say the least. So I basically said on Twitter, should we call the Big Ten the Bigger Ten? And Emily Eman, who works for the Big Ten Network, pointed this out as basically when Washington joins the Big Ten in 2024, or whenever that's going to be, or whenever it's going to take place, the Big Ten is going to have over half of the teams in their conference with the national champions. So basically every team in terms of the Big Ten is going to have a national championship, which 42 teams have won a national championship altogether, and then half of those championships are going to be comprised in the Big Ten. I know UCLA's championships came from when they were in the Pac-12, as well as USC's and whatnot, and Washington also won a championship back when they were in the Pac-12 as well, but still, that's still mind-blowing and bonkers right there. So all in all, for Washington and Oregon, it's huge just because Washington and Oregon are just powerhouses. And you kind of have to wonder. And I also forgot to mention Arizona, and I think Arizona State and Utah are also going to the Big 12. And Colorado is going back to the Big 12. So the Pac-12 is basically only comprised of Stanford, Oregon State, Cal, and Washington State. It's only going to be 4 teams next year. So I kind of wonder, can the Pac-12 pluck, and is the Pac-12 going to be plucking teams from other conferences, and who are they going to pluck from? They're obviously going to have to pluck from the West Coast. So in terms of women's volleyball, who's going to be a rightful candidate? And who's going to be a rightful candidate for all sports? I mean, in terms of women's volleyball, maybe Hawaii, and maybe Hawaii for other sports. But what would that entail for men's volleyball? Would they move from the Big West to the MPSF, or would they just stick with the Big West? I don't know. And is San Diego State still going to possibly join the Pac-12? And is the Mountain West going to maybe join together with the Pac-12? I just don't know. I just really don't know what's going to be of the Pac-12. And there are also rumors. I just got this word today that the ACC is trying to get Stanford and Cal to join the ACC, which I think is just mind-blowing if you ask me. The Atlantic Coast Conference. I'm pretty sure Stanford and Cal don't apply to being Atlantic Coast. But look, Big Ten didn't really apply to USC and UCLA when they first joined. So the Big Ten is just getting bigger and bigger, and soon one may just have to wonder, how big is just too big in terms of conferences? And if they get to have 20 conferences or a 20-team conference, what'll happen then? Do they just split them up and have the Big Ten West and the Big Ten East, and then they just have the winner of each conference just face one another in a tournament? Like, I just don't know. And maybe they just have like a melting pot or something based on like geography or something. Or maybe level of talent. Okay, level of talent would not be fair, but regardless, this is just so interesting if you ask me, and so concerning. I mean, going back to what I said about Hawaii in terms of women's volleyball and them joining the Pac-12, there were rumblings back in the COVID years of Hawaii joining the Pac-12 when the Big West announced that fall sports were not going to be played post-COVID, which kind of made sense at the time, just so Hawaii, a significant and prolific program, would not be out of a year. But then what would happen to the other teams? What would happen to like Long Beach State or UC Santa Barbara and all those teams? And the Big West would be losing out on Hawaii. And I guess maybe the Mountain West would be losing out on maybe Hawaii in terms of football, but does Hawaii really want to go to the Pac-12 in all sports? Maybe? But this is a volleyball show. I would like to see Hawaii in the Pac-12, but I don't know. I would hope that the Pac-12 doesn't want to merge with the Big West. I don't think anyone wants to see Stanford in women's volleyball. Any of the Big West teams wants to see Stanford in women's volleyball. No. And then what will happen with the Pac-12? Like, if there's not enough teams, like, will the other teams have to like freelance, or will they just get dumped into like one random conference? Like, it just makes no sense. Like, let's say based on like talent, let's say some of the teams based on their talent gets dumped into like a certain conference, based on geography or based on talent. Maybe that's what'll happen. But I just don't know. I mean, maybe Stanford can join the West Coast Conference, and then maybe Washington State can maybe join the Big West. Well, I don't know. Washington State that seems a little far-fetched. And maybe Cal can join the Big West. Cal can join the Big West. Stanford can join the West Coast Conference. Washington State can join the Mountain West, and then Oregon State can join the WAC. There you go. I solved the problem. That way we don't have a Pac-12, and then those 4 teams can go into different conferences. Problem solved. Kinda. But anyway, I just think this all these Pac-12 teams migrating to the Big Ten is kind of interesting, but at the same time it's kind of giving me a big headache. But what can you do? But on that note, we are up against time, and that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time that we drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. If you're listening live on IE Sports Radio, do stay tuned in as Where You At Sports Chat with Joey Pagart is coming up in approximately 3 minutes. But for everyone else, and for everyone else at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. I will see you all next Monday for Set Point. Also on Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show at my standard time, noon Pacific time. But just remember, that big surprise is basically somewhere in this show. It's not the end. But until then, have yourself a great rest of the evening. Enjoy the volleyball action. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!